Money FM 89.3. Best of breakfast. Morning Shot.
Thanks for joining us on Morning Shot. I'm Audrey Siek. The Constitutional Court's deliberation on the motion to impeach South Korea's former President Yoon Suk Yeol is taking longer than expected. More than 3 weeks have passed since hearings ended in late February. Now, to put things in perspective, deliberations in the impeachment cases of former Presidents Park Geun-hye and Roh Moo-hyun concluded within 2 weeks. Meanwhile, the Korean National Police Agency says that it will raise its emergency alert to the highest level on the day of the Constitutional Court's final verdict, with plans to deploy 14,000 police officers to Seoul for President Yoon's impeachment ruling as protests intensify, with hundreds of thousands of South Koreans taking to the streets. For more insights on all this, we're joined by Dr. Yongwook, assistant professor from the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at NUS. Professor Ryu, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning. So it's been over 3 weeks now since the Constitutional Court of Korea has deliberated this case, and it has already set the record for South Korea's lengthiest presidential impeachment deliberation. Can you perhaps start by explaining why the court is taking so long with this verdict and your assessment on what this might mean for Yoon's political future?
Okay. The court is keeping a very tight seal on any information leakage. So whatever people have said already about the likely verdict date or the outcome has been all speculation. But based on the lengthy deliberation, I think one can infer two possibilities. One is that the court seeks to achieve political balance and fairness as much as it can. And since the opposition leader and the main presidential contender, Lee Jae-myung, has his own criminal case decision before the court, which will come out this Wednesday, 26 March. So most people predict that the decision will be the original conviction of Lee Jae-myung at the district court, and therefore the appeal court will find him guilty this Wednesday. And after that decision comes out, the Constitutional Court will announce a date for its verdict on Yoon and uphold Yoon's impeachment. And that way, since both leaders from both political parties will be found guilty and will be dismissed from the political scene, then it might appear a more politically balanced and fair decision. And that's one possibility. The other possibility is that the court is divided on Yoon's impeachment. And as you know, for the court to uphold the impeachment, it needs 6 judges to agree. And the speculation is that out of current 8 sitting judges, only 4 or 5 are in support of impeaching Yoon. Now, since a split decision could produce further political polarization and turmoil, the court is trying its best to achieve consensus through heated debate and discussion, and that's why it's taking longer than initially predicted. So I think based on how long it's been taking, I think one of these two possibilities could exist. Now, at the beginning of the proceedings, very few people thought that Yoon could be reinstated, but as the proceedings went on, controversy emerged on some procedural aspects and the possibility of key witnesses and their evidence and testimonies being contaminated or even forged with assistance of some opposition politicians. So all this raised the issue of whether or not the Constitutional Court, which has not had time to establish accurate and clear facts and cross-examine key witnesses and the reliability of their testimonies, has sufficient information to make a ruling on the case. Now, my own view is that the court will still likely to uphold Yoon's impeachment, but I wouldn't be surprised if a split decision reinstates Yoon back to presidency.
All right, so many moving parts here. And let's look at this from a historical perspective. Most South Korean presidents, including Yoon, have seen their approval ratings slide gradually over their time in office. So this isn't new. Most of his predecessors have faced the same fate. So is there a deeper political or social reason behind this trend that causes this to happen?
Yeah, I think so. I think the usual decline in popularity of all the past presidents should be understood in the context of initially high expectations at the time of inauguration, as well as of structural problems South Korea faces, which go well beyond individual presidency. and called for extensive structural reforms. Now, presidents are politicians, so they resist adopting and implementing policies that are deeply unpopular. And these are the precisely policies that structural reforms call for. But without structural reforms, socio-economic problems of South Korea cannot be resolved and gradually weaken the economy, which people will see, right, as time passes on. Thus, people become disappointed after a while, leading to the decline of president's popularity over time. And this has been repeated over and over, whether it was a progressive president or conservative president in the past.
Okay, and in South Korea, presidents serve a 5-year term with the constitution prohibiting presidents from seeking a second term. So this rule was established to prevent excessive concentration of power in one leader, but does it also affect how far ahead presidents plan their policies and their legacies?
Sure. The 5-year presidential term limits how long-term his policies can be. That's why some propose reforming the current presidential system to be a 4-year, 2-term system with the possibility of re-election, similar to the United States system. There is an additional factor which, in my opinion, is even more important in limiting the president taking longer-term policies. And that has to do with the midterm legislative election. The midterm legislative election has a significant impact on what the president can do. So, for example, if the president's ruling party loses that midterm legislative election, the president himself will soon become a lame duck. Then, not only the opposition will continue to seek to block what the president wants to do, but the ruling party also sees internal power struggle after that defeat in the legislative election and begins to deviate from the president's policies. If the president seeks to win that legislative election, he cannot adopt structural reforms, as they would be deeply unpopular among the public. I would also say one more thing here. Many assumed that the president has a lot of power. But as the current political situation in Korea attests, I think it's really the National Assembly that has even more powers and bestowed with relatively easy power to impeach high-ranking government officials and stifle the function of the government. As you know, the democratic system operates the best when there is checks and balances. Currently, the National Assembly can impeach key government officials, including the president. National Assembly can impeach some of the members of the judiciary, but neither the judiciary nor the government has any particular means to impeach any of the members of the National Assembly. So I think for a longer-term perspective, the Korean politicians need to think harder about how to achieve the right balance when it comes to checks and balances across the 3 branches of the government.
All right. So looking back at South Korea's past impeached presidents, are there any key lessons that we can take away from these cases?
Yeah, there are a lot of points, right? And I will just mention 3 here. The first, politicians from both sides of the aisle must learn to make compromise with each other rather than demonizing the other or denying their political legitimacy. The situation of political turmoil that we have in South Korea today is caused by politicians and their egoistic and narrow-minded behavior. And hence, unless they change, the politicians themselves change, Korean politics won't change. And we will likely see the repetition of similar political turmoil happening in Korea from time to time. Second, I think the procedural justice is as important as the outcome justice. Now, Yoon's release from the arrest already attests to this. And the key reason for that release was based on the violation of procedural fairness and justice. And when procedural justice is not attained, parties might not even accept the outcome, even if it's a just outcome. So the court proceedings involving Yoon's impeachment have also, to some extent, revealed some questionable practices by the court, leading some to argue that the court itself has violated the law in handling Yoon's case. And the last point that I want to make is, whatever the outcome may be, and going forward, future Korean government must work hard to increase public trust and confidence in key government institutions. At the moment, the Korean public has a fairly low level of confidence and trust in almost all public institutions across the 3 branches of the government. And this does not bode well for an efficient operation of government, and this must be fixed.
Yeah, so speaking of not boding well, with President Yoon's suspension, we saw a flurry of leadership shifts, including Prime Minister Han Duck-soo briefly stepping in before being suspended himself. So how well equipped is South Korea's political system to handle disruptions like this? And what institutional or constitutional reforms do you think can be imposed to make it more resilient?
Speaking of Prime Minister Han Duck-soo's case, so his decision by the Constitutional Court, whether his impeachment was legal or not, will come out later today. And that could provide some information as to what we might expect of the court in terms of the Yoon's case. Now, the fact that the Koreans resort to the legal procedure whenever there is a major political and constitutional crisis is a good thing, and shows the political legitimacy that people have of the system. However, the problem is that the legal procedure is still heavily influenced by politics. And more, the court is becoming politically polarized than before. So it's becoming similar to the U.S. system where the Supreme Court, judges just decide, along the political lines rather than, on the merit of law. Korean court is becoming more like this. And usually politics permeates to all corners of Korean society in different areas, and that's usually not very healthy. Another issue, as I've already mentioned, which has to do with checks and balances. So across the three branches of the government, there's got to be better checks and balances, between the three branches of government. And lastly, no matter how perfect the system may be, it is, in the end, the individuals who run the system. And hence, if politicians don't change and improve their behavior, there's little the system can do to produce better politics. So I think in the future, better and responsible people must go into politics and run for public offices, and the public must elect the right kinds of people into the right positions. Now, of course, all this is easier said than done.
For sure. And Dr. Ryu, before you go, you did allude to this a little bit earlier, but we understand that South Korean citizens are quite vocal on issues and are pretty engaged when it comes to politics. So how does this level of civic engagement impact governance, and how challenging is it for a president to maintain public support while making tough decisions?
In politics, citizens' engagement is critical. Because if they don't voice their views and concerns become non-existent. As you mentioned, Korean citizens are quite active when it comes to politics. So the level of engagement is very high. However, where there needs to be improvement is the civic needs of their engagement. Many Koreans participate in politics with almost similar to blind loyalty for the party and politicians they support. Not because particular policies align with their values or benefit them. Now, this becomes quite challenging to politicians, including president, as they become idolized and say or do things that will please their own support base rather than seeking to achieve general benefits for the Korean society.
All right, we've been speaking with Dr. Ryu Yongwook, assistant professor from the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at NUS, about the ongoing impeachment deliberations and what they mean for South Korea's political future. Dr. Ryu, thank you so much for breaking this all down for us and for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Keep it here on Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.